the 20-week mark, she was like, we don't expect him to live, so we're going to go over your options for when he passes away in utero. Every single thing that I did for 20 weeks went through my mind.
Did the topic of abortion or like aborting him ever come up?
Just give Hayden's brain bleed to me, and I'll take it all just so they can be healthy. I prayed that prayer numerous times.
There is no prayer like hitting your knees for your kid and for his health.
They transported him directly to the NICU.
Is there anything, any potential lingering effects or anything that y'all know of or are concerned about? Well, welcome back to another episode of the Broom Tree Podcast. My name is Eric, and I have my lovely wife, Amanda, sitting with me tonight. And we have a super special episode for y'all. We brought some friends of ours from church over, and we've actually just recently started to get to know each other not too long ago. And so as we're getting to know y'all, so is the rest of the internet and all the people in the world. But what we've gotten to know y'all has been really special, really unique, and our paths kind of crossed for the first time. I'll introduce their names in a second, but our paths crossed for the first time in the story that y'all are going to share with your child being born. And I remember our pastor at our church just texted us and said, "Hey, take that super good casserole that y'all make to this address." And we were just like, "Okay, sure. Why? What's going on?" And he was like, "Family's been through a lot. They'll share it when they're ready, but just take a casserole to this address." And so we were like, "All right, sounds good." And so I remember we dropped it off, and then really didn't even ask any questions. We were just like, all right, whatever. And then like a few months later, y'all came to church, and Tyler was like, "Hey, that's the people you took the casserole to." And we were like, "Oh,
cool."
We just thought it was like a casserole off into the universe and like whatever, But we have Witney and Wyatt with us today, and I kind of want to turn the floor over to you guys before you dive straight into the heart of what we're here for. Maybe tell our Broomtree family a little bit about yourselves. I know at dinner y'all kind of shared how y'all met, but just a little bit about yourselves so they kind of know who you are.
My name's Wyatt. Born and raised in Gallatin, Tennessee. I'm a welder. That's my trade.
Okay.
Started out when I was 19, and I've just been doing it ever since.
Okay.
Met Witney back in September of 2023, and we've just been with each other ever since.
Okay. I like the fact that you're, before you answer, I know I've already interrupted you. I like the fact that you're a welder, because I think a lot of times people think that the people we have on the podcast are all pastors and youth pastors and young adult like pastors' kids, and that could not be further from the truth. And so I appreciate just like having, because I was a warehouse guy, so I appreciate having someone else who's just like a normal, what would we consider like a non-church work life. So
and I know you got to know them at dinner, but I was doing bedtime, so I didn't get to hear 90% of getting to know you guys.
Well, I mean, we got to find out that Eric is actually kind of funny.
Kind of funny. I'll put it on my resume.
Well, I'll say very funny. It's very funny.
I like it.
That's why I fell in love with you.
I like it.
Funny guys always win, and that's why I got Witney.
I like it. But now, Witney, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Witney. I'm 25. I had my first son at 19. I was a single mom until I met Wyatt. I have 3 degrees, including my master's in business administration. I am in finance, and I love to travel.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, you have your master's. I'm a horrible husband because I don't know what it's in business, right?
Business management.
Okay.
But yes, and also love to travel. Yeah. So I think we might be friends.
Yeah.
You guys can go like travel Europe and see all the cool stuff, and we'll just stay behind and like build stuff. He'll build stuff and I'll videotape it. That's what we'll do. But no, okay. So you said you had your first son when you were how old?
19.
And then y'all had your son, because I don't even actually, I guess I never asked this. How old are you guys right now?
25.
I'm 26.
25 and 26. Okay, so he's not even a year old yet. So sometime in the last year, right? He's 8 months, I think is what you said.
Yes.
So walk us through, in as much detail as you care to share, and for those who don't know, what's your son's name, the 8 month? What's his name?
Hayden.
Okay.
So cute.
So for everyone who's, we're not just going to call him, or it for the episode. Hayden.
The thing.
Yeah.
Was that expected? Were you guys hoping to have a child, or how did that whole situation kind of unfold?
Yeah, we weren't not trying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's kind of how we landed with Joe too. We kind of got to a point where we were like, at this point, whatever happens,
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
So okay. So then you guys are just hanging out, doing life together. Find out you're pregnant. What's that initial emotion?
Well, for me, I was very excited. Now I'm sort of like monotone when you hear me talk. My emotions are sort of like neutral most of the time. So on the outside, not a whole lot of people could actually tell that I'm excited, other than just me saying I'm excited.
Yeah.
But God answered my prayer, and I got that chance to be a dad, and so I've been eternally grateful and just appreciative of every moment with them.
Yeah.
yeah, and I wanted my oldest to have a sibling really bad, so we
All
were
right.
like, yay.
So I'm glad you touched on that. And maybe I got a little bit ahead of ourselves. When it came to y'all deciding to have your son, you said you had your first son at 19. Did that play a role at all? You said you wanted him to have a sibling, but did that dynamic play a role in y'all's like how did that relationship start out? Because like I know when we met at 16, so like we never had to deal with any dynamic like that. When y'all were dating, was there like a season where you were maybe feeling out if he was going to be a good fit
For
your
sure.
son already? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, so me and my son's father actually have like rules and boundaries in place because we're still really good friends. So we have to date for a certain amount of time, like that we both agreed upon. He had to meet my son's father first before he could meet my son, and so kind of just dating me before falling in love with me before he could fall in love with my son, But then they met and
Hit it off.
All went good.
Actually,
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier at dinner, we have sort of this thing where like we know so many people, like we're so interconnected, but like it's not like well known. When I met her first son's father, we were at lunch and we were talking, and turns out the place that he was living at, he ran into this guy in the weight room, and turned out it was a guy that I played football with, and I was doing some side jobs with him years ago, and like that's me and him became really good friends. So just the fact that like her first son's father like was good friends with this guy, and then like I was also good friends with that guy, that also kind of like helped bridge the gap between us meeting for the first time and kind of keep
then
things
their
off in a
friendship,
positive way. And so we're real chill with each other. So.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
awesome.
And I know that's always a tough, like, it can be a tough situation to be in if, like, because you talked about your parents splitting. My parents split when I was really young, but I met my stepdad so young in my life that it was never odd to me to, like, see my mom, like, dating or anything like that. Like, it never felt weird to me. And the same with my dad, with my stepmom. They met when I was extreme. Like, I don't have any memories without my stepmom around, and very, very few without my stepdad around. And so I think for a lot of people, there can sometimes be, at least in church culture, there can be some stigma or some weirdness around it. But like, if you just remove that spiritual pride that people have around what a family should look like, and you look at like the majority of families across our country, it's like, it's not that uncommon. From what you were sharing with your relationship with him, I think it can be navigated really well, where everyone still ends up like, I never heard my parents really bash each other.
Yeah.
I obviously there was a reason they weren't married, and I never really asked why they weren't together. But I was okay with it too, because like my mom was happy with him, my dad was happy with her, and it was all, everybody was kumbaya. But okay, so you started dating. You decided like, okay, we're ready to start our family. You find out you're pregnant. You're over the moon. You guys are right where you want to be. Walk us through kind of the beginning of the pregnancy up until the reason we met you guys. Kind of walk us through the beginning of the pregnancy. What was that like?
I was on a cruise with my son, and I couldn't get out of the bed. I was like, oh, this motion sickness is horrible. Come to find out, it was Hayden.
Yeah.
But, the beginning of the pregnancy, we were really excited, but I'm very, very sick during pregnancy. So, lost 25 pounds,
First trimester is the worst.
It was
Yeah.
traumatic.
Yeah.
Just like every 30 minutes I hear Whitney, they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wish I could help you, honey. But
You
like,
feel so helpless. You're like, what can I
I'm
do?
like, you want some
Yeah.
water? No, leave me alone.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
Yeah.
Like
okay, I
8
love
weeks
you.
into it, Eric's like, "How you feeling?" And I'm like, "Don't talk to me." I'm like just so mad. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Nope, don't."
I'm like,
Yeah.
you want me to make you some food? I'm gonna throw it up. Don't even give me
Yeah,
food.
yeah.
I'm so
and
sorry.
with my first son, Leo, 20 weeks was like when I stopped getting so sick that I could actually start gaining weight back, you know? And so that's when it like comes into this part of it, 20-week anatomy scan. So I was like expecting to be like, okay, like we're there. And I was like, oh no, kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget. There was one time that I was so sick and I was like, I think I can eat a chicken sandwich. And Eric went downstairs for like 45 minutes, made me a chicken sandwich and everything. And it took him so long that by the time he brought it upstairs, I just started crying because I was like, you have to get it away from me. I can't do it.
I remember one night, he literally, it was like 4 or 5 restaurants that we went to. He got me Cinco, my favorite Mexican restaurant. I took a bite and I was like, and he was like, threw it out the window. He's like, where next? It was so bad. He tried to get food in there.
I remember our, like, would do our like monthly budget, and it's like, we spent an ungodly amount of money eating out because I would like, okay, I think I can eat a Sonic hamburger tonight. And that's where we went. We had to go. We didn't buy like any groceries that month just because it was just whatever was in the moment.
There was no point. There was no, she never knew what she wanted. And I was always wrong if I like suggested something. So I was just like, I just became a yes man and was like, whatever you say is what I'll do. I don't care. Okay. So then you go for, was it at your 20-week anatomy scan? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we went in for just our regular 20-week anatomy scan, and everything's going good. We took my mom, my son, Leo, and she's cutting up with us and everything, and then she goes like quiet. I'm like, okay, like I've done this before, and they're just like still cutting up and stuff because he doesn't know, and so I'm just like, okay, that's weird, you know, and so she just is like, she's very short, just answering like questions that like my mom might have or he might have. And I think that's when he was like this. Maybe it was that ultrasound.
I think that was a later ultrasound.
But yeah, so she's like quiet and I'm like, okay, like I'm freaking out internally, but I don't say anything. And then the doctor comes in. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is cool. So yeah, that was it. And he sat down and he was like, so there's some things we found. And with my first pregnancy, my first son, easy pregnancy, easy delivery, like natural birth, like everything was as you think a pregnancy like should be, you know? And so this, I was like,
this is
I don't even know what to do. Like, you know, like this is so crazy. And so yeah, he sits down and he was like, we have 3 things that we found. And you want to talk on?
Well, the medical word, that's what it is. It's kind of blanking in my head right now, but it's IVH, which is basically just a brain bleed.
Yeah.
He had a brain bleed around his left and right ventricles, and so that was just one of them.
Yeah.
The other thing that I remember is that he said she was also bleeding just outside the uterine wall, which was the medical term for that was the sub-amniotic hemorrhaging. And so when he kind of explained those to us, we got hit with, you know, if he makes it through pregnancy, you know, we're looking at, you know, mental retardation, you know, developmental delays, cerebral palsy, and worst case scenario, he was going to die in the womb. She might have had to, you know, have a stillbirth. And so that was very heartbreaking to hear. And then when he goes into the explanation of her sub-amniotic hemorrhaging, you know, just outside the uterine wall, he's, you know, bringing up the risk of a placental abruption. And so, you know, we've got our son who is, you know, in critical condition in utero, and then Witney also in critical condition because if her placenta abrupts, you know, she could bleed out and die within minutes. And so I remember we left the hospital that day and we were torn. I remember we actually drove separate because that day I went straight to the hospital after work. As soon as I got in my truck, you know, I don't cry. Really.
I'm crying right now, man.
You know, I can only think of, you know, maybe a handful of times where I've cried. And this one, I cried like a baby. You know, I cried for probably 30 minutes straight on the way home. And, you know, we had to go to Leo's baseball game or his t-ball game. And so, you know, I pulled to the house and I'm like, all right, dude, you got to tighten up. I
feel like that was his first experience as like dad, like, you know, like pull it together and be the dad, be the mom, you know, like kind of
so
thing.
I just remember leaving the hospital that day, I felt like kind of like it was a test from God. I prayed for this moment. I prayed for this chance to, have a son. And then he turns around and gives him a brain bleed. And so I didn't know if it was a punishment. I didn't know if it was a test. It felt more of like a test. It was like, you prayed for this. You wanted a son. I'm giving you a son. Now prove you can still be a dad. Prove you can still be the dad that, you prayed to me that you were going to be. And so the more I thought about that, I came to terms with, if he has cerebral palsy, I'm going to love him just as much as if he was the most talented athlete in the world. Same if he had mental retardation or, just any type of delays or just complications. And so
let me ask you, and I should have said this at the beginning. I try and preface this. I'm a crier.
Yes.
And I can't help it. I've always been a crier, especially having a daughter has only made it that much worse. You talk about like you prayed to be this type of dad, and you pray to be this type of dad, and you find out you're having a baby. You're kind of already like parenting, co-parenting, whatever people want to call it. And when you say I pray to be this kind of dad, talk a little bit about, for you specifically, what your faith kind of meant to you in your younger years, because it's not common for young men to pray that young to like, I want to be a good dad, or I want to be this type of dad. Most guys in their late teens, early 20s are off doing whatever else. But when it comes to, I prayed for this, and when this thing happened, when this diagnosis gets handed to me, I felt like it was a test from God. I think most men, if you remove the faith piece, they don't say those things. They, if they even mention God, it's a punishment, or it's, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
how did your faith play a role in your like perception of how you wanted to parent?
Well, one thing that I can say definitively is that I remembered, when I was thinking of, what parenthood would look like for me. I remembered the key, like the word that I saw or that I still see in the Bible very often is patience. And so to have faith, you also have to have patience, in my opinion. And so, you got to be patient with God, and you got to be patient with yourself.
So did you grow up in church?
Well, as I told you earlier, my mom had us going to a Mormon church, but I stopped going until right around the time I was 13 or 14. And so I didn't go to church for many years after that. Actually, the first time I got back into church after I stopped going, I was 19. I was in Jacksonville, Florida. I went to, I think it was called Celebration Church. I think it's a pretty big church, nationwide, but I just remembered, as soon as I walked through those doors at Celebration, it literally felt like the Holy Spirit just embraced me with a big warm hug.
Yeah.
And seconds later, I meet the nicest guy. And he could easily tell, like, right off the bat, like, I was going through a hard time, when I was in Florida. I didn't have any family or friends. I was just kickstarting my welding career. So, I was isolated. I felt alone, like, every day, struggling with confidence. Can I make it as a welder? And so that's kind of my history with church.
I think that his thoughts on this weren't always that. Like when we first got the diagnosis, he wasn't, that wasn't his first thought. I think honestly, we were like, oh, why is this happening to us? Oh, this might be a punishment. And I couldn't get out of that headspace. And so he had to pull himself out of that headspace, I feel like, to be positive, to be encouraging, to be like, like we couldn't both kind of be there. Yeah. And so I think he saw like me being down, me being depressed, me being negative, and so he was like, you know what? Probably just seeing me, all of those things, he kind of pulled himself out of it and was like, no, because if my son, because the diagnosis, like he might not walk, he might not talk, he might not be able to eat, different things like that. I think that knowing those things, and I was just dwelling on them so hard that he was like, okay, but if that is the case, I'm going to love him anyway. And so that's when it started feeling like a test for him. Like I want, like he is a sports guy. So like I want a kid who can play sport, you know, like you want and desire these things. And he was like, yes, I would absolutely love that as a father. But also if he does have CP, if he does have these things wrong with him, I'm still going to love him the same, you know?
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. Well, I like that you bring that up because I think it's impressive. You know, I don't know the dynamic of like co-parenting or step parenting or whatever it is you guys call it in your situation. But I know for me, you touched on like that feeling of like that first like big dad moment. And I remember we had just found out you were pregnant with Joe, and I think it was an ultrasound, and I wanted to go, and work told me I couldn't go. And I remember telling my boss, like, this is a big moment for my daughter, so I'm not going to miss it. And I called you that and told you, like, hey, I might have just lost my job because I told them that I was going to this thing. And Amanda said that was the first time I had ever referenced this baby as our daughter. And I remember the first time I heard Joe's heartbeat, like on the little monitor thing, you know, she's this little bean on this screen that I can't read anyway. And as soon as they turned on like the mic and I heard her heartbeat, immediately every like ounce of pride and like selfishness or like manliness or like whatever you want to call it in me, it was like, it just flushed out. And I remember I just like melted on the floor and I was like, almost overwhelmed with like, what am I supposed to do with this like information that I've been given, that like there's this human now who is gonna look up to me and or hopefully look up to me, you know, that I'm responsible for even before she's born. Like I'm already responsible for her.
Yeah.
And I remember that overwhelming feeling of like, yeah, just fatherhood. And I bring that up because you touched on like, because you were in that spot, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But as soon as you said that, I immediately felt this feeling in my spirit of like, if that's how we feel about our kids, how much more God feels that for us. And your ability to say like, someone has to be the strong one. That's a really crappy spot to find yourself in, where it's like, someone's got to be the strong one. What I love about our faith is the Bible teaches us that Jesus is the strong one for us. Now, he's not physically in the flesh with us, so sometimes you still have to be the strong one in the room. And that like, that's tough to do. But it's also refreshing to me of like, there were several nights where Amanda was stressed that Joe's pregnancy wasn't going to go well. And I would do the same thing. Like, it's going to be fine. Let's pray together. Let's do this. And then she would go to sleep, or I would leave early to go to work. And my whole drive to work, I'm terrified and I'm bawling my eyes out and I'm praying and I'm crying and I don't know what to do. And then I come home and Amanda's like, how was your day? And I'm like, it was great. God's doing great things in our life. And like, and it's not that I'm lying to you, but it's like you said, someone's got to be the more like emotionally stable one, but behind closed doors. And I don't know if you were like that, but behind closed doors, I was like, every time she wasn't looking, I was sweating and crying and just like a nervous wreck. And I just remember like feeling that feeling of like God telling me like, I get why you're doing it for her, but you don't have to do that for me too. Like you can cry in the car with me and that's cool. And so I did a lot. Did you kind of experience anything like that?
Yeah. Honestly, like I said earlier, I'm not much of a crier, but ever since that first diagnosis that we got, I turned into an emotional baby.
I would imagine.
I cried many days. Me and Witney cried many days together. We just felt defeated. And it's hard not to when you get something like that.
You can't do anything about it either.
And I can't tell you how many times I prayed. I was like, God, just please, like, put all the burden on me. Like, please, like, take away Whitney's pain from pregnancy, just her sickness. Like, give that to me. Like, every type of like physical pain that she has, just give it to me. Like, anything that like, just give Hayden's brain bleed to me, and like, I'll take it all just so they can be healthy. I prayed that prayer numerous times, throughout her pregnancy, and so it was just.
I'm overly spiritual about certain things, and I'm sorry. But what you just said is, I imagine the exact conversation that Jesus had with God the Father when it came to us. I mean, you literally said, like, give it to me so that they can be healthy.
Yeah.
And I think about that. When I think about that with Joe, it's unquestionable. Like, there's not a second thought in my mind. Like, if someone breaks into my house and someone's got to die, it's for sure not going to be her.
Yeah.
You're going to
give
me
your life
every
for
time.
them.
Yeah. And then I do this thing with God where I think he doesn't want to talk to me,
Yeah.
or I think he doesn't see me or he doesn't care about me. And it's like, bro, all I'm doing is watching you. We just got, this seems stupid, but we just taught Joe yesterday. Joe got scared of the refrigerator for some reason. And I had to teach her that the refrigerator is not going to hurt her. And I felt like such an idiot.
Yeah.
Like, as I'm teaching my daughter to not be scared of the fridge. But in her world, like, this is a big deal. And what I didn't realize, it took us a couple of days to figure this out. Joe would stand in the kitchen and cry because she was afraid to walk past the refrigerator. And I just thought she was being an obnoxious 2-year-old. And so I just was like, you're going to cry it out and figure it out.
Yeah.
And when she realized her dad was willing to walk through that with her, we walked back and forth past the fridge holding my hand 2 or 3 dozen times. And now you guys saw her tonight. She's running all over the house. And so I know that might seem stupid to some people, but like as a parent, you understand that feeling of like, if I can figure out what's bothering my kid, why would I not fix it for them?
Yeah.
And so, but I think you referenced this just a minute ago. You said you guys cried together too. I think that was really important. That's something I failed to do with Amanda. Whenever Amanda was stressed, I was always Mr. Positive to the point where she started to feel crazy for not feeling positive and alone of like, why are you not stressed about this? And I was trying so hard to be the tough one. It took me a while to learn, like, I don't necessarily have to drop all the way down there where she is, but if I don't show any crack at all, then she just feels crazy that she's stressed about this pregnancy and I'm not.
Which is so crazy now listening to like your guys' story that I had zero reason to be scared about anything.
Yeah, everything was fine on our end. We were still terrified.
It was all just in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I would feel very alone or like you said, very crazy because I would be like, well, what if, I'm not feeling movement and what if, and he's like, everything's fine all the time. And I'm just like, well, I don't, I felt like I almost couldn't talk to him or share, how I felt about things. So I think it is really cool that you guys were able to do that together. And also, like you were saying, like, I think it is cool and shows a solid foundation for your guys' relationship. It almost becomes like almost second nature when one person's struggling in a relationship. You don't even realize that you're being the supportive one during that time of like, he'll just have a stressful day. And I'm like, well, I don't even think about it, but I'm like, well, I can't have a stressful day now because I have to be there for him.
Yeah.
And I think, and that happens vice versa all the time. And it's really cool to see, like, I think God designed it that way for sure. Not to do life alone because you guys can lean on each other in moments like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, because we spent a minute with him, let me ask you, go back to that same day. You hear all the news. You guys get in your separate cars. He starts crying. Walk us through that day for you.
I feel like I blacked out for a lot of it, honestly. He said IVH, it was intravehicular hemorrhage.
So it was
something
I can pull it up.
Very fancy. Yeah.
I can pull it up.
And then there was also the third
to.
thing that he didn't mention was there was like a place on his heart, something, I don't know. They weren't worried about that. They were obviously very concerned with the brain bleed. None of the doctors in either of the practices that I had appointments at that day had seen it before. Find out no one in the Nashville area had seen it before. It's very common in preemies to have brain bleeds like after they're here, but no one had experience in utero, so of course they couldn't tell us anything. They couldn't that day we got we got the diagnosis, we got all of the possible things that could be wrong with our son. That was a lot to take in, and I didn't cry at all. Like I sat there, like my oldest son was there, so I sat there and just took it. Like I was just like okay. And so after my high risk doctor, MFM high risk, he became my high risk because then I was high risk, walked us to my OB, and my OB sat down and was like, I think she saw like, you have no emotion right now. Because I was just like blank. And she's like, do you understand what you were just told, basically? Like, do you understand what's happening? And I was like, yeah, like, And then she went through it again, kind of thing, just like, and she said, we don't expect him to live, at the 20-week mark. She was like, we don't expect him to live. So we're going to go over your options for when he passes away in utero. I had to start going every 2 weeks after that. So they just expected him to not be alive, not have a heartbeat and the next appointment, then the next appointment kind of thing. So I went over my options, for when he was to pass. And then my mom came over and was like, it's okay. and just like held me. And then I was just like, you know, like, she may have taken my son. I can't remember. I truly don't remember that drive home at all. But just the 2-week appointments after that, just constantly going.
I would imagine that 2 weeks is like the longest 2 weeks
The
every
longest,
single
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Especially because all of them told me like, he's not going to make it, you know, like we're
just
sorry.
which appointment
you
is
know?
it going to be that you don't hear a heartbeat?
That's literally what I was waiting on.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
That's so crazy.
And so as she got far enough along, we actually got a baby Doppler, and so we would just listen for his heartbeat like every other night. Anytime like.
But then I was like obsessing over it.
Yeah, she was like, I haven't felt him.
I have to put it down.
I haven't felt him move in like 30 minutes. So baby Doppler.
Yeah.
So let me ask you then, same question I asked him pre that day. What did your relationship with the Lord, what did your faith kind of look like? Because you said your first pregnancy, you had no issues. So you probably didn't have much reason to believe this one would have any challenges, this pregnancy would have any challenges. So then you're processing all that information. You're kind of just like absorbing it in. But at what point did at any point your faith start to kick back into the back of your mind at all? Or was it just like tunnel vision?
I was struggling really hard. I wasn't really close with God before this pregnancy. I had kind of walked away, like after I studied abroad in Europe and just learned more, got more educated, got more well-traveled, and just understood, like I didn't really like American Christianity. Like it just turned me off to that idea of it and everything. So I didn't find a church home that like I felt, you know? So I just wasn't going to church. I wasn't really praying. I wasn't in my Bible. So I just really didn't have a relationship with him, you know? Like I believe in him, you know, like all these things, but there wasn't a relationship. So going into that day, that's just how I was living my life at that point. So I was not Wyatt. I was angry. I was like, because I did have a healthy pregnancy before, you just never think like it's going to be me kind of thing. This wouldn't happen to me kind of thing. So ignorantly, but so I don't know. I think I was really struggling after I found out. 2 week the first appointment after the diagnosis, his brain bleed had gotten bigger. My internal bleeding had gotten worse. So I was even more mad. You know, they had more, like we went through so many tests to different things to see if I was attacking Hayden and causing like genetically, because he isn't my first son's father. It could be possible that it wasn't working genetically and I was attacking Hayden and I was basically killing him and it was making me bleed internally too. Just all kinds of tests that were ran. I felt like a lab rat at one point, you know, just like test after test, week after week. No answers, no results. Everything was coming back. Like it was a medical, because when you have something like this, it is trauma. Like something big, like a huge car crash, like something huge happened. And they were like, "You're sure nothing has happened?" I was like, I think I would remember something super traumatic.
Sure.
And so I was like, no, nothing's happened. Like, I don't know. You know, they're like, it's weird that he's bleeding and you're bleeding. And I'm like, yeah, it's really weird. Thanks.
That's your job to figure out. Like, no, I don't know.
But they never figured it out. It's just a medical mystery, I guess. But as to why, but I just think my faith was not there. I was very, very, very negative. And because I am so type A, I want to internalize it all. I want to feel it all. And as a mother, I felt like I had to prepare myself for a special needs kid. I'm being told, like, I wasn't so negative that they were like, he's not going to make it. And I'm like, okay, he's not going to make it. You know, I'm like, no, he's going to live. Like, I know like my son's going to be Earthside. I felt that, but you're telling me he isn't going to be able to walk. He's not going to be able to talk. He's probably not even going to know who I am. He's not going to feel joy, you know, like all of the things, like he's not going to have the life that I wished for him as his mother. And I was accepting that. And I was getting my life ready. I was getting my heart ready. I was getting his brother ready to have a special needs kid. And so after that point of like, I'm going to have a special needs kid. I'm getting, you know, like myself ready for this, like what my life will look like moving forward. I mean, I'm so type A. I was looking into like wheelchair vans. I was like, look at this van, you know, like just every possible route. I like, as his mother, I wanted to have like everything in my head, you know, like nothing could hurt me if I knew everything that could possibly be wrong. And that's where I was living, like worst case scenario every single time. And so at that point, I was just like, this is my life, you know, like I accepted it, like, even though I probably shouldn't have, because doctors don't know everything. But, and then having faith, like my parents are really religious and stuff. And just hearing faith, honestly, made me mad. Like, I was like, I don't want to hear it, you know, like, because outside I'm like set in this is going to be my life, you know, like my heart is okay with this
have it
now.
under control.
Yeah. And then like even my mom saying like, and she was like, why is it pissing Witney off that I'm saying these like helpful things, you know? And I'm like, okay, you're saying like he's going to be fully healed. You're saying like all of these things. And what I'm hearing is if he is this, you're not going to love him, you know? And so I was like,
that's interesting.
Turned off to everything faith-wise, even still. The only thing that got through to me was my son. I was praying, like finally, at one point I was like praying, you know, there's no prayer like hitting your knees for your kid and for his health and for, you know. And so I was praying. I was like, please, God, just like, you don't have to I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm asking to just stop his bleed. Like, because like he will only get worse, because it was a grade 2 from his first MRI. And it will only get worse from here. He will only be worse off from here, you know? Or he will die from here, like if it doesn't stop. And so I was like, please just keep it stable. Like, I don't care about my bleed. Just keep him stable. And my son is like, God, I know my mom said that she wants it stable, but I want it gone, God. And I know that you're going to make it gone. And if he's to be in a wheelchair and I have to do absolutely everything for him, I'm going to do that. He'll catch the football in his lap. He doesn't need to be able to use his hands, you know, just like his faith. And like, it was just like so amazing to just be like, God, like, I want it gone. And then he was like, I will do everything for him if that's what he needs from me, but I know that's not what he's going to need from me.
He literally put his foot down.
Yeah, he was like,
crazy.
God, you know, and then like just his faith and like, but I know that's not
so
what my
cool.
brother's going to need.
I love that too, because like I think it's so easy for us. I mean, we all go to the same church. It's so easy for people to like not take kids' church seriously, and like it's just as big a deal to them as it is to like you're getting a son, he's getting a brother, and so like I don't know, that makes me really encouraged.
Also, just like to be able to pray in the boldness that kids can pray in. Of you know, like they don't know like all the stuff that you've researched and all the things the doctors have said. So he's just like, I don't understand why you guys are making such a big deal about it. God's going to fix it.
And I've always told him, like, pray to God, like he's your friend. Like, just talk to God. So he was like, I'm putting my foot down. I'm talking to him. Like,
you know, I could be wrong, but I feel like that was around the same time where you were talking about he gave us a thumbs up at one of her ultrasounds.
Yeah.
And this was after the diagnosis. And so we were all just kind of joking. He was like, see, he's telling us like he's good. Like, he's got it under control.
And so at that point, I was more able to hear good things. You know? So like my son truly like changed my negativity, the way I was looking at the situation, just like truly his faith truly just pushed me through the rest of the pregnancy in having faith that like, yes, if he has this wrong with him, like I'm going to support him through absolutely anything and I'm going to love him, but that doesn't mean that it has to be what it is, you know, kind of thing. So
that's so cool.
And Leo, I'm pretty sure Leo talked to Hayden through your belly almost every day. Every day of that pregnancy.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too, is like, we went through this a little bit with your parents, and you can talk on it more than I can, but I know there was some frustration around people speaking faith after, because her parents passed 10 weeks apart from each other. Her mom was super unexpected. Her father was from cancer. But her mom actually went first. That's what was like kicked everything off crazy, was we just woke up one morning and she was gone.
That's terrible.
And I remember, like, I vividly remember when your mom passed and we were calling people and they were like, you sure it's not her dad?
Yes.
And we were like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. But then kind of you were touching on like from your parents, but like we had a lot of people who would tell us like, well, heaven's real. And if there's a heaven, they're there. And you almost just want to be like,
I would just like, I I didn't want to go to church or be around those people because I like wanted to gag every time somebody was like, well, the Bible says right here that, you'll see him again. And I'm like, that makes me more sad, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like, you can also tell when people haven't gone through something, difficult, they don't know what to say. And you try to have grace for that. But in the moment, you're just like, please stop talking. And it turned me off. Like everything like religious and anytime people would bring up God was just a reminder of where they were, So it was almost like if I just don't hear any of it, then I don't have to think about it at all. And that's kind of where I would go, like I probably for 6 months to a year, I was like, please, I don't want to read my Bible because that makes me think about it. I don't want to go to church because that makes me think about it. I don't want to talk to, these hyper spiritual people because it makes me think about it. So I just wanted to shut it all off at that point.
Yeah.
Well, and I bring that up because I wanted to ask for people, because my prayer is that people who watch this episode aren't just our friends and family, but they're actual couples, moms, dads, whoever, that are going through maybe not the exact diagnosis, but a tough pregnancy, and giving insight to the reality of that lifestyle so that they don't feel like I made my wife feel of like alone or crazy. Because I'm sure in all of your Googling, you probably didn't come across many podcasts where there were parents sharing like, you're not going to want to hear about it. And that's okay. Because I remember like people would preach that to us and I would get mad, and then I would almost feel guilty that I'm mad. And it's like, well, no, I know in my heart that I love Jesus. I just don't want to hear this right now,
For sure.
And I think that's okay. Like, I think that's healthy, you know? And so as far as like that practical piece of y'all's lives, you said, your oldest son was talking to Hayden in your belly and was praying these bold prayers. You're stressed internally, but trying to be, like the rock. You're trying to build a plan. We talked about kind of how that affected y'all's relationship with the Lord, but I would imagine your pregnancy wasn't a secret. So how did that affect, like, if people already know you're pregnant and now there's this diagnosis? I see some people post about it. Some people don't post about it. Some, some people tell all their friends. Some people just, how did you guys navigate that? Forgetting all the spiritual stuff, just from a human level. How do you navigate? I told everyone we're pregnant and now there's this thing.
Yeah. My mom, asked for permission if she could post, and so she did. She received the prayer, like, it's very appreciated, like, keep it over there, So I think before I got home, before we left that appointment, I had texted my girl chat, this is what's up. They were at my house before I got there with dinner ready, flowers. I can't remember. They just showed up and poured into me. I think so many people poured into us during that time. My work, I mean, they were just absolutely amazing, and brought a gift basket. You just just the small things, but people in our lives we definitely leaned on.
A huge support system, just be there for us, and that was very awesome, and I'm very appreciative for that.
How did as much detail as y'all want to share, did it impact y'all's relationship at all?
Oh yeah, for sure.
How did y'all share whatever you feel like comfortable sharing, but how did that impact Paul?
Well, then naturally I think it caused resentment from both of us. I think I started to resent her a little bit because she, anytime I tried to say something positive, or her family, she didn't want to hear it, and then anytime she said something negative, I didn't want to hear it. So I wouldn't say we fought a lot, but it was just, it came to a point where we can't talk about this pregnancy if we can't come to like some sort of middle ground and, find some sort of like commonality of like what we believe. And so for a while it was like that, it was kind of hard to, discuss the pregnancy without it, leading to resentment. But, as time went on and we came to terms with, the possibilities, but, we, at the end of the day, we still loved each other, and we were still going to be there for each other. And so, the more, we had that in the back of our minds, like, hey, we still love each other, and, no matter what happens, like, we're not going to let this break us. And so the more we implemented that mindset, things started to get better with us.
I also think that he took on that positive mindset way before me. And I think our crying together and, we were just heartbroken together for a while. And then he took on the positive mindset. And that's when I was like, I don't want any, like, stop, like, do not say anything positive. Like, I don't want to hear it. Until Leo completely shifted my change on it. And then that's when we struggled. Like, cause I was like, and that's probably why he was resenting me pretty heavily. Cause he's like, the mother of my children can't be, the mother of my child can't be positive about the situation, you know? So I'm sure that was really hard on him. And then it got a little bit better towards the end
And
once we were both
something else that I'm sort of just now realizing is that, during your pregnancy, as we got closer to the end, right before Hayden was born, I actually started to notice a big shift in her mindset. She started to become more positive. She started to see, the silver lining or just the bright side, and, after everything that they told us, at the hospital or, all the OB appointments with ultrasounds, MRIs, she started to believe like, he can make it. And I believe in my heart, or we believed in our heart, he was going to be okay regardless. And even if he wasn't, we were going to love him with all of our heart. And so as we got closer to the end of the pregnancy, I was kind of hesitant to, get my hopes up, because I was like, I really don't want to have my hopes so high, like he's going to come out walking, well, not walking out the womb. But,
that would be wild.
Yeah.
I'd be like,
that would have been a medical mystery.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't want to get my hopes up, super high, and, him being born, just be a perfect baby. So I sort of like kind of came down off that high a little bit, or came off that positive mindset just a touch. Yeah. But she sort of like met me in the middle, and, she was like getting super amped up, and she was like, we're going to do this thing. Our baby's going to be good. And so, like right at the end of her pregnancy, we came together, we met right at the middle, and, he was good.
I think time is one of the most undervalued pieces of like God's tools that he uses. Sometimes it just takes time. And I know that's probably disappointing or frustrating to maybe people who are listening who find themselves in a tough spot. But for us, like, I know when her parents passed, it's like, this is like a big trauma for y'all. Our big trauma was her parents passing. Like, I just wanted to be over it as quick as I could get over it. And what I learned is like, some grief just takes, like, you just have to get through it. And it's a little different because ours was like, there was no, I hate to say there was no hope because like heaven's real, but like there wasn't like an anticipation that they're going to come back. Like, it was just like, we're grieving the fact like this is what it is. But I think the same principle applies to y'all of like, you're having to come to terms with like, this could just be what it is. And for us, like there's just no quick way to get there.
Yeah.
It just takes like, she had to be negative for a couple of months. And I don't think I had to be obnoxiously positive, but it was also carrying me through. Because like, I don't know where we would have gone if we both would have gone down that rabbit hole at the same time. And I think the Holy Spirit knows that about us. And so instead of like, I've said this before on the podcast, our God isn't a God who just reaches down and manipulates our emotions. It would be super awesome if he did. But then our emotion, like, I think joy only feels joyful because you know what sadness feels like.
Yeah.
100%.
And so like, for us, I can sit back now and go, we needed, if you'd have asked me in my youthful arrogance what I would do if my parents died, I would have said, well, heaven's real and they're there, so I'm going to celebrate. And the reality is when your parents died, I was really upset with God for like almost a year. I didn't even touch my Bible because I was like, I hate what you've done to my wife. Like, I almost love my wife more than I love Jesus. Sometimes if I'm not careful. And so then it's like, you allowed my wife to go through this thing. If you were one of my friends, I wouldn't be your friend anymore. Like literally because your God is the only reason I'm considering this relationship right now. And so I think it's really good for people to hear, like sometimes it just takes a minute to land back on that same page and to not, it's easy to do. Y'all did it, we did it, but it's really easy to fight through that. And sometimes it's healthy to fight through that, but it doesn't have to just be a constant fight either.
Right.
And so I would say, to whoever's listening to this, like, know that about your partner. Like ultimately they're just as hurt and confused as you are, even if they present it differently. And you said, hey, in the back of our minds, we knew we loved each other. In the back of our minds, it's like, we want to be on the same page, but sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to get there. And I think that's healthy. And I think that's okay to do. So
I have a question real quick. Did the topic of abortion or like aborting him ever come up?
Yes. So if what they were testing me for genetically if I was attacking him, I asked if I could be induced to save his life, and that's an abortion in Tennessee because he wasn't at viability. So I couldn't have an abortion to save him, or I couldn't save him by having him, which really frustrated me. But then like an actual abortion too, because my best friend, since kindergarten, she's a nurse. She's very logical. She's not Christian. But she held my hand through all of it. And she was like, you have to deal with this. Like, you know, like this will be your life. And everyone who's supporting you now, if they go away, like this is your son and that is your life now, you know, like, do you want this kind of thing? And so it was thrown around, and I sat in my anger, I sat with it, like, you know, and so obviously we didn't go through with it.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything beyond think of it.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a hot button issue for
Well,
sure.
no, I would imagine
But-
like I didn't even know if like the doctors were like, hey, this is not an option. You know.
Yeah.
What I would ask too, is that a conversation that you two had to have with one another?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
did it just stay like internal, like an understood answer, or did y'all have to talk about it?
Yeah, no, we definitely talked about it.
the doctors did not, because of Tennessee, they weren't touching it. They couldn't even help me even to save the baby. The only time that they could help me intervene was when his heart stopped, basically. My nurse friend did look into it, so I was thinking about it. We had discussed, he did not want it. He wanted his son, and I also wanted my son. But
it seemed like he was maybe possibly attacking you as well. Like your life was in danger.
Yeah.
So that I would
Yeah.
imagine that had to be a thought to
And
go through your mind.
No, for sure. It is in the back of my head now, but like during it, I was like, I have Leo. Like I don't want to die, and I don't want to be like, you know. And so that actually that's a good point. That was my thought for a long time. Is like I don't want to leave my son that's here. You know,
Right.
like I love this baby, but like this is my Earthside kid, and he needs his mother. And so that is when I brought it up to him, and he wasn't behind it. He didn't support it, but he supported me.
Yeah.
He was like, whatever you need, if it does get to a point, because they can't intervene in Tennessee either. Like even if I was dying and Hayden hadn't lost his heartbeat or whatever, you know? So they were going to let me get to like placental abruption or whatever. They were going to let me get to near death before they stepped in. So that's when we started considering other options. And my nurse friend like was looking into it and stuff, and I could never like look into it or like, you know, take any actual steps. But no, it was thrown around, and he didn't support it. He supported me, I think. So
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we haven't really talked about it a ton on the podcast, and we it's on our list of topics to discuss at some point. So I won't dive into it a ton. I don't know enough about it. One, as a man, but two, just like lack of effort on my side to research it. But I will say I've talked to a lot of families, Christian and non-Christian, and I think morality-wise, people try and paint it, you know, as it's a black or white issue, like not race, but like it's either right or wrong.
Yeah.
And then that's usually how it's presented. Very rarely have I actually had a conversation with someone where it's that clear,
yeah, for sure.
especially when you factor in some of the other circumstances. You know, I had a dinner with a family that we're friends with. I won't say their names or anything, but we were at dinner with them, and the same question got brought up about if it was right or wrong, and they were like, absolutely, it's wrong in every scenario, blah 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 blah. And I asked her, the mom of the family we were with, she has multiple children, and I said, if you knew you weren't going to make it because of, you know, baby number whatever it was, and you were going to leave all your other ones behind, and the table just went quiet.
Yeah.
And I said, so it's not that simple.
No,
Yeah.
it's
It might,
not.
yet, like, right or wrong, you can debate that, and like that's a conversation for another day. But all I know is it's just not that simple. And I bring it up. I'm glad you brought it up. I talk about it not to discuss is it right or wrong. That's it. We can talk about that another day. But to discuss that when it comes to the moment in the young family that's in the position, it is never just yes or no.
Yeah.
There's almost always some other factor that plays a role. I think Christians do a really bad job of bashing and judging, and a very poor job of listening, because I never heard you once say I wanted it,
Yeah.
and I never heard you once say absolutely not. If you do it, we're done. I heard two people have a conversation where you said, I don't want it, but what are the factors playing into this conversation?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, for whatever reason, this is the sin that the church has decided, this and homosexuality, we've decided like, we're going to die on these hills.
Yeah.
And I understand the intensity. If you believe that it's morally wrong, the intensity to want to defend, but I think as strong of a defense as you could present, it's equally, it's irresponsible. I think if Jesus was speaking to a woman struggling with that decision, he would listen to her before he just told her.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think that's where the church does a bad job. I think a lot more women probably wouldn't go through if they felt like someone was listening and there to support, and not just standing outside the abortion clinic telling them that they're wrong, but actually helping them do what they might view as right or whatever. Anyway, another episode for another day. But I bring that up because I think there are a lot of couples, even Christian couples, who they really sit back and they have to entertain that thought for a minute and go, well, what if we don't? What could happen? Could you not make it? And people, the same Christians who stand outside the clinic are the same ones who say, well, that's a lack of faith. Well, dude, sometimes I struggle with a lack of faith.
Yeah.
You know, sorry.
Yeah.
Everyone does.
Sometimes I doubt God and I doubt what he's going to do in my life. And especially you add in my wife and my kids, like close friends, close family, like my trust, even in the Lord, if I'm being honest, the closer they are to me, the harder it is to trust God with them.
Yeah.
Because it's like, this is my thing. And I know that's not right, but it's what I do. It's what my flesh wants to do. When my daughter is sick, before I grab her and pray for her, I inspect her, figure out what's wrong, take her to the medicine cabinet, give her a medicine or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to do what I can first and then trust God with the rest. And I'm trying to grow in that. But
it's one thing that one of my old coworkers told me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't actually know for a fact, but he said in the Bible, God will judge us for our hearts. So, it's the actions you do and where your heart lies when you do them. So, on the topic of abortion, I'm not out there, trying to be an advocate for, abortion. I'm not telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do. But if it comes down to, is this child going to make it, or is this mother going to make it? There's so many factors that come into, just the decision, like, is this happening or is it not happening, And I think that, plays a big part in everyone's life, across the board, with every factor or, every facet in life, not just abortion, but, just anything.
And we were also dealing with, I could not make it, but we were being told that he wasn't going to make it either. So it was like I literally thought at one point, because I journal like really hard, and I remember writing like, I'm waiting to die. Like, like that's what I was being told. Like at any point it could happen, and my son's not going to make it, and so that was almost the easiest, like in your mind, like this is like a quick fix, like this takes care of problem, and so kind of thing.
Well, and like I would imagine, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I would imagine like hindsight's 20/20, right? Obviously, you guys will, and I know we'll get there, that he is okay. So like the thought of like ever aborting him is like a crazy thought, but being told in that moment like he's never gonna make it, like. And you also said that your faith, like you weren't really big into faith at that point. So to not consider it, what I would almost imagine like that would have been crazier for me to hear you say that you guys didn't have that conversation than you guys did.
And I was like scouring the internet, and I could only find a handful of cases, and like like TikTok, like Twitter, like whatever it's called now. Like actual people who have dealt with this. Like I was looking up like what his diagnosis was. And I mean, I was reading studies. There's not even that many out there. So, but I wanted people, and I wanted to see what their lives looked like. And that is not what I saw my life looking like. There was not our case ever. Like I did not find that one time, like every case was not what you would want an outcome to be. And so it was very discouraging in seeing that and having these options and not having my faith and all of the high emotions. And
that was another extremely frustrating part of Whitney's pregnancy was, all the researching that we did, and no answers. Like no
I thought
no
you were gonna say me.
information.
I was frustrated.
Only a couple days.
But yeah, absolutely no answers.
Yeah, no, just any question we had, with the doctors, just online, Chat GPT.
We had an OB, we had a high risk, we had a neurologist, we had a neonatologist. Like,
I was
Nothing.
asking every question that I could think of.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, you piece all of that together, and like Amanda alluded to, remove the faith piece for a moment. And I'm speaking specifically to Christians right now, judgmental Christians who are listening to this, who heard the word abortion and they're typing, or have already typed their hate comment. You take someone who doesn't have that lens of the gospel, the lens of eternity. Take a young woman, maybe doesn't have a good support system around her. She gets pregnant, whether by choice or by accident. Things go south. And the most confident voice in her life is a doctor telling her she's not going to make it.
Yeah.
Her baby's not going to make it. She lives in a state where it is allowed, maybe even encouraged. And as Christians, we can sit back in our ignorance and our arrogance and say, that woman's this, that, or the other. Those doctors are this, that, or the other. Instead of taking the time to go, that's a traumatic experience for the woman to go through. And I get so, I don't know, I get worked up, not because I think it's murder or not murder. I get so worked up because we as Christians can lose our compassion so quickly in those situations. And I was sharing this with that same couple at dinner. I said, I think the failure is maybe even in our culture's presentation of the conversation is you only get two options. There's pro-life or pro-choice. And as Christian, we did this. They didn't do this. We did this. We made pro-choice, pro-abortion.
Yeah.
And that's not what it says. And so if you gave me a piece of paper and I only had those two, I can tell you this in confidence, I honestly don't know which one I would pick. And I would have probably picked for certain pro-life until I had a daughter. And there's so many scenarios that can come up that are outside of her control. There's so many factors that play into it. And I think as Christians, we've done a bad job of making people feel like if they even entertain the idea, they're these horrible parents or these horrible people. And the reality is we're not just male and female, organisms walking the earth, but we're moms and we're sons and we're friends and we're these people that even if Hayden doesn't make it, you are still a dad.
Yeah.
Even if it was only for 20 weeks or 24 weeks, or like the same people who want to say abortion's wrong would say you were a dad for 24 weeks.
Yeah.
And they can't take that. Like no one gets to take that from you. And so even I say all of that to anyone listening, if that conversation's rolling around in your head, you're not a bad person for that conversation rolling around in your head. And we can put links in the description for resources that you can reach out to. We probably need to do an episode on it soon. I wish I was more educated, and I'm just not. I just know that God's a God of grace. I believe all babies go to heaven. And I don't even know if I've necessarily found like a scripture that says that. It makes me feel good to believe that all babies go to heaven.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a world that wouldn't happen.
I believe all babies and large dogs go to heaven. Small dogs do
Debatable.
not confirm. I can confirm that small dogs will go to heaven.
You personally, did you ever have like a moment where you spiraled of like it was your fault or you internalized or it's hard not to when you're pregnant and you're like everybody's like you're doing this magical thing, but then when it goes wrong, everybody says it's not your fault. It's hard not to go down that road. So I wondered if that's how you internalized it at all.
Yes, I think that every single thing that I did for 20 weeks went through my mind at that point. Like what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And I had just taken my son to Japan. What was that? I was 18 weeks. So 2 weeks before my 20-week anatomy scan, we had just gotten back from Japan. And I was like, could this have caused it? But if you look, like pregnant celebrities, like people are always traveling. They're like, no, like the plane wouldn't have caused a brain, and I was like, no, that's what it is, like that, and I was like dead set on that. And my OB was like, Witney, this is not your fault. Yeah. And so just hearing that was nice, but doesn't mean anything to you if you're not ready to accept that.
Right.
At some point I did accept like I didn't do anything crazy, like I was big into fitness before pregnancy, so I worked out, like, but I wasn't working out because I was so sick. So it's not like I did anything crazy. So yeah, I think that I was trying to figure out like what happened. It was like eating at me, not necessarily like this is my fault, but like
I need an answer.
yeah, like, what happened? Like, what if it was my fault? Kind of thing. So
yeah, I know. Like even in I was like 2 weeks ago. They were like, or no, it was at our 20-week anatomy scan. They were like, yeah, he's running a little small. I think we're kind of like, we're going to have to watch like how big he gets and everything. And they were a little bit worried. And I was like, is it because I wasn't eating enough? I was really trying. They're like, no, that's not what happened.
You have a lot
but
of
immediately
pressure.
You're just like, I did something. I must have done something.
You're growing a human.
Yeah.
And like you messed up if the human isn't growing right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for real. Well, and I would imagine too, like there's some sort of like probably because obviously like I've never grown a human, but there's a helplessness from our side,
Right? Yeah.
and I'm sure you feel it too. But on our side, it's like there's literally nothing I can do but sit back and watch not only my child hurt, but now my wife or my partner hurt too, and it's like. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And I'm too mad to pray. I'm too prideful to admit that I'm struggling. So I just put a smile on and then go cry in the car, So fast track forward a little bit now. So all this is happening. You guys are trying to believe. You're having these tough conversations. Everything's happening. Was there a moment between that day and his birth where you knew that things were going to be better than originally like diagnosed? Was there like an appointment that things started to look up, or was it just he was born and here he is?
My bleed started resolving. His bleed never resolved. His bleed was stable.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we ever got. We had a second MRI right before he was born, and it was just stable.
It just showed that there was no growth in the bleed, so that was a good sign for us.
It hadn't put any pressure to enlarge his ventricles that would cause all of the problems. So it was like not good news, but it was like hopeful that he wouldn't be as bad as they were saying and things like that.
And that was one of the specialists, concerns was his ventricles in particular. He tried to emphasize to us, like, as long as these ventricles don't get enlarged, he should be okay. Because in most cases where, doctors see cerebral palsy or mental retardation,
intellectual disabilities.
Intellectual.
Well, our doctor did say mental retardation a lot, but I don't think that's the correct term anymore.
Well, yes, that.
He was old school.
It's cool.
He said that's where you see most of these cases is when these patients, these kids have enlarged ventricles, and so for us to see and hear that like they hadn't been enlarged, the bleed didn't grow bigger, that was a positive sign.
They still wanted 37-week scheduled C-section because we didn't want to do any more. We didn't want him to have any more birth trauma that could worsen his bleed, obviously.
Also, one more thing that I particularly saw as like a good sign that he was okay in developing was for most of the pregnancy, his head size was measuring fairly small, and from what I remember, it was not in a very good percentile. I want to say he was below 20% or close to 20%. But as soon as like he hit third trimester, his head measurement shot up to like 95% or something. I was like, this boy got a big old head. There ain't nothing wrong with that brain.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So
Yeah.
Okay, so then he's born, 37 week, you said, pre-planned C-section. Comes out. You guys get to hold them, and they're always just disgusting at first. It's beautiful and it's disgusting all at the same time.
yes.
What was that emotion like? And I want to ask you first specifically, Wyatt, as the first time that you're holding your son for the first time, you've had nothing but 37 weeks of hope and then fear and then confusion and then frustration and all hope again, like all of these things. You're holding him for the first time. What is that? Talk me through that day.
Well, they didn't let me hold him when he was taken from Whitney's belly.
Okay.
Because they transported him directly to the NICU, and that was due to respiratory distress.
Okay.
But when I was finally able to hold him, it was like a big sigh of relief, and I can't remember how many days exactly. Maybe it was like first or second day.
I think it was next day.
Next day in the NICU, I got to hold him. It was just a big sigh of relief,
A whole day without being able to see him.
I mean, well, actually,
I couldn't even see him.
I had a a smaller interaction with him before I got to hold him. You know, I was able to follow him to the NICU, and he was asleep. But, you know, I just was rubbing his hand while he was in the little, what do they call
Incubator
them?
thing.
Incubators. And, you know, I could feel his warm hand, but he looked so blue. I felt so bad for him, but I was like, I knew he was okay. It's just like he was so blue. I just wanted to like warm him up. But I was just rubbing his hand, and he just opened his hand and then grabbed my finger, and he held my finger for, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes to an hour.
And you're like, I'm never gonna move. You were gonna have to move.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm not-
I stayed with him for as long as possible until they were ready to take Whitney back to, you know, her room, and then I went and met with Whitney. And so, but yeah, it was just a big sigh of relief. You know, I teared up. I didn't full out cry, but I teared up, and they were happy tears for sure.
Yeah. Now, for you, I mean, a C-section's it's its own, you know, thing you're dealing with over there. But you're recovering. You know, he's in the NICU. Everything's, you know, looking up. How many days until you were able to go see him and hold him?
Yeah, so he was born, and I did get to hold him like right out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I held him for a little bit, and then he turned completely blue because he had respiratory distress. He had to get on CPAP. You know, they had to like work him. He had fluid in his lungs, just things for being born at 37 weeks instead of 40. But then they took him out. I went to recovery. I can't remember. It's a blur, but I think it might have been same day, super late. Because I was determined. I was
Yeah,
like, I'm
you-
seeing this
yeah,
baby.
no,
I don't
yeah.
care.
Yeah.
You definitely went to the NICU first day.
Yeah.
Like the first day he was in the NICU. Yeah.
Because the C-section was at like 7 a.m. So we're talking like almost,
Oh, yeah,
almost
so it's
7
a
a.m.
good
next
day,
day. Yeah,
yeah.
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 So,
Because
Yeah, maybe it was
you
the day.
were on pain meds. Remember?
I was like this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, she.
No. You rolled me first day. yeah. But I do have a video of me walking like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I saw him when I saw him, but he was on CPAP. So, I mean, he had IVs in him, and you couldn't hold him
Yeah.
for a minute until they got his high oxygen down, and he couldn't even eat for the first day because swallowing and stuff. But once all that was cleared up, we got to hold him, and then Leo came in a couple days later because he was kind of scary looking, like or intimidating, not scary, for Leo. So once he got all that off, then Leo got to come in. But really, since we didn't have any like looking up, it was just like looking steady the whole pregnancy, even up until birth. We still were like, we're so blessed. He's eating. That was like a huge thing, like the G tube. And not that it would have been the worst thing in the world, but like I was just so happy he could swallow, he could eat, he could breastfeed, he latched, like he was perfect. He was like, I was like crying, like he's
latched-
doing great.
He
you
lashed
know?
within 60 seconds.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
it
was amazing. And you know how like special that is in general. So just like thinking like he won't be able to eat, you know, is just like, oh, sigh of relief. But then he had to see his neurologist. He had to get MRIs in the NICU. They were inconclusive because he would not sit still.
Yeah.
But then his ultrasound, it was non-detectable by ultrasound. So we were like, okay, that's a good sign. You know, we were still kind of on edge. Because he had a neurologist appointment at 3 months, and we were just kind of waiting to see what the neurologist had to say at that point, because he was perfect in our eyes no matter what,
Right,
you know,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and I was like, oh, he looks like his brother. He looks good. Like, so,
Right.
yeah, but then,
And even after, you know, he was born, his development has just been astronomical, in my opinion. Like, I remember when they put him on oxygen, I think he started out at like 1 or 2 liters. I don't remember the measurement. It's like 1 or 2 liters, like a minute or an hour. Not an hour. That doesn't sound right. Whatever the numbers are, they said he had to get to like 6. Is that right?
no, I think it was 6 and it went down. We don't know.
Oh no, you're right. You're right. He had to start out like at a higher number and then get down. So they told us, you know, they couldn't take him off oxygen until he got down to 2 liters or under. And so they said, you know, it likely will be like maybe 3 days or potentially even longer. Well, by the end of the first day, you know, they were confident enough they dropped him down to 4 liters. And so by day 2, they were like, he's progressing really well, you know, but we're gonna keep our eye on him. We're gonna keep him on oxygen for at least another day or 2. Well, by the end of that night and into the next morning, we walk in. He had progressed so well overnight that they took him off the oxygen. He was good to go. And so from that point, he was just,
He's a fighter.
he is, yeah.
Yeah. So what's fast forward to today? What for? Because people now we're invested at this point. What is there? Anything? Any potential lingering effects or anything that y'all know of or are concerned about?
So
Not at all.
3 month appointment, his neurologist cleared him. He said, this is a healthy baby. He does not have CP. And so we were like, perfect, great. We love that. It's still being cautious, watching, because I wanted early intervention for him if he needed anything. He doesn't sit still now. He'll crawl anywhere. He's saying dada. So like nothing. He eats regular food. He has 5 teeth. So,
Yeah.
and will eat anything you put in his mouth. So everything that I was worried about, he's passed. And
So when you get that all clear, we talked about like your first reactions after the diagnosis. You go to the 3-month appointment. You're feeling confident. Things are looking up based off everything you've seen, and then you get like a professional say like, "Hey, we think you guys are good." What does that feel like?
like a sigh of relief, like, okay, like that's what I thought, but based on my baby, but like it's good to hear that. It's reassuring for sure. Still to this day, he could have some developmental delays in learning, but again, that is nothing compared to the life that the doctors told me he wasn't going to have at all, or the small life that he would have. So everything is just like whatever it is at that point, like it'll be a quirk, like
Right,
it's
yeah.
fine.
Learning developments. He can come hang out with me, man, because I've never been tested, but I'm confident I caught something somewhere.
I tell Whitney all the time, he might be a little slow, but he gets it from me.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that for sure. I ask because kind of leading into the last thing I wrote down on my questions for y'all. So it's so easy to do. We've never been through anything even close to what you guys are going through. But I'll share a really short story of the closest thing I can relate to. It's incomparable, but it's the best thing I got. When Joe was born, she was born at 3:00 in the morning.
I know.
After a work day, so I was
That must
exhausted.
He had
been-
it so rough.
Dude, I was up for like
I don't know how he did it.
30 hours.
Oh, I know
something
you
like
were
that.
miserable.
Dude, I was dying in there, man. I didn't have an epidural. And anyway, but
I
Joe's
just labored for 12 hours.
Yeah.
There's
Joe
not
was
caffeine
born-
in that epidural.
Right?
super early in the morning, and but she was born and she came out crying. Everything was fine. They clean her off, suck all the stuff out of her lungs. Like, it's just the first like 3 minutes are just absolute chaos.
Yes.
And I'm just standing in the corner like crying, like I don't know what to do. I went over there, I'm like counting her fingers, counting her toes, making sure everything's where it should be. And then they hand her to me. They clean her off a little bit. Well, they hand her to you first. Do all of y'all's things
Like
y'all
the
are doing.
skin, yeah.
And then they hand her to me, and I'm holding her, and I'm exhausted and emotional. I don't know what to do with this thing. And they're like, "Hey, do you guys want us to take her to the nursery little thing?" And I was like, "Sure." And then at this point, it was like getting close to 5 in the morning. Ryan was with us, and Ryan was like, "I think I'm gonna go home now."
Yeah.
And they said, "Hey, we're gonna take her." The main doctor gets in at like 7, and they always do the first thing they do is like a screening of the babies born in the night. So I'm like, all right, cool. We have literally no reason to believe anything's going wrong. And so they go to the thing and they bring her back, and I call it her tanning bed.
Yeah.
They brought her back in that little blue light blanket.
Yeah.
I'm the worst dad in the world because I didn't Google a single thing about parenthood. I was just trusting the Holy Spirit to tell me what to do. So they bring her back in this like tanning bed looking thing, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And she had
Jaundice.
She had jaundice.
Jaundice,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I literally now don't even know what it is. I think it's something to do with their
Just yellow.
kidneys.
And
or
I think
something.
like 90% of babies have
Yeah, it's like
jaundice.
super common. And I like to show you how little I knew about it. She was like, "Y'all can hold her, but you need to hold her in this like blanket." As soon as they left, I took her out of the blanket and was like, "She's the cutest little baby in the world." Playing with her and holding her. And the nurse came back like an hour later,
she's mad.
and she yelled at me, and she was like, "You need to keep the if you can't, we'll keep her in the nursery where it's like there's a bigger light that whatever." And even then, she left, and I took Joe back out. My mom showed up, and I was like, "Check her out," and I took her out again. And the nurse came in and was like, "Seriously, dude, you gotta stop." And I remember like feeling like, "Oh, this is something really like," and everyone was like, "All the babies have it. It's totally fine."
I remember because I didn't know what it was either. And I asked my doctor and I was like, is jaundice like bad or something.
Yeah.
And she just went, how are you feeling? You know? And
Yeah.
I was just like, why aren't you answering my question?
Yeah.
Like,
So like we were in the hospital for like 4 days, and like on day 2, they kept bringing her back in the blue thing, like in her little tanning bed. And I called her tan bed because it was
had
blue,
little
and she had to wear these little glasses.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so anyway, and I'm like trying to laugh it off and play it cool, but every day they're getting like more and more severe about like
yeah.
quit taking her out of the thing.
I think it was taking her a while to.
And then on the 3rd day, I remember them saying like, "Hey, these blankets are like a temporary measure. The big light in the nursery will like address it much faster, but like obviously you guys can't come in there." And I was like, "Hey, whatever's best for her." Plus, like I honestly could sleep a little bit, and they kept her all night for like 6 or 7 hours. And I want to say I was up all night, scared to death, but honestly, like y'all know,
Yeah.
I was asleep on the little couch in the corner. Like I was just trying to sleep a little bit. But I remember they rolled the first time since she was born. They rolled her in without the blue light,
Yeah.
and something that every baby in the world has. And I like fell to the floor, and you were even like,
You good?
"What's going on, dude? What are you doing?" And I was like, "God's healed my baby. I was so happy.
Yeah.
He's so good."
I didn't even know he was worried about it. And then he was like, oh, thank God. And I was like, were you stressed? Because I definitely was like trying to match your energy.
Well, like we
Yeah.
talk about that as dads, like I don't want to stress you
Yeah.
out. You're going through so much already. But every time she would fall asleep, I would like face the wall and just cry because
Yeah.
I'm like,
Right.
I don't even know what this is, but like it doesn't sound good, you know. And then I remember when they rolled her in without the blue light, and it gets to my question for y'all. I remember like immediately being like, wow, God is so good, you know, that this is the situation we're in. Fast forward like 2 weeks, we're at home and she's crying in the middle of the night, and I am so pissed off that I'm not getting any sleep. I felt the Holy Spirit say, like, at least she's not under the blue light. Like you're yelling at her in your bedroom, not in the NICU, not in the infirm or the nursery where the blue light is. And I just remember that feeling of like literally 2 weeks, and I've already forgotten how what God had done for me. And it's just human nature. And so I asked that one.
Well, it doesn't demean or like make it any smaller the normal things that we go through with kids.
Yeah.
Like you're still gonna get frustrated. You're still human. They still cry. They still disobey. They still do all of that stuff. Just because God saved them doesn't mean that they're not little terrors sometimes.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know,
Well,
like
that's what I would ask is like in the moment, was there a feeling of like, wow, God, you did this? And then like second part to that is, do you ever deal with parent guilt when you're not in a good mood with this miracle child who like, if I told you at 20 weeks you were going to be annoyed by him, you would probably be like, not a chance. I just want this boy to live.
Yeah.
But then he lives and you're like, sometimes he's annoying. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
What was that? The first part of that, when you get the good diagnosis, was there an immediate like, wow, praise God, or did that take a minute to kind of?
I feel like during my pregnancy we got there and we started coming to church and stuff. I feel like going into the hospital, I wasn't nervous. I felt like peace. I think after the Leo thing during my pregnancy. So there was like already praise, you know, like it is what it is, and he's alive.
Yeah.
Thank God, you know. I think what you talked on started in the NICU because it's the NICU. Like these babies are fighting for their lives, and our son wasn't fighting for his life anymore like he was in my womb, you know, like that is how we lived
He
our
was
whole
just
pregnancy.
big chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these babies that we saw every single day, like with their parents, sometimes without their parents, you know, just like literally fighting for their lives. And it's like, yeah, thank God, you know, like, we're going to get to go home soon, you know, like, yeah, there's this, there's that. He has to do this, he has to do that to go home. But these babies, the one baby that was beside Hayden had been there for 5 months, you know? And so it's like perspective, like if this taught me anything, if God was trying to do anything in my life, it was give me perspective. Because yes, now he can do something and I'm like, Hayden, like just test my patience. And then I'm like, thank God you can do that, you know, like
100%.
literally anything he does, you know, and just like when he's like babbling and he will not stop babbling, I'm like, I prayed for this.
Yeah.
I prayed for you to be able to speak. I prayed for you to be able to be mobile. Come here. That literally gives me perspective every single day. And like I said, I journal, and I journal to my boys. Like, they have their own individual journals. And in his first entry before he was born, I was like, I will never forget, like, every milestone will be celebrated, from crawling to literally anything you can do in your life. Like, we are going to praise God for every single thing that you do. And like, I needed you in my life. Like, you got me back to God. You got my faith back. Like, you changed my life. Like, you changed your brother's life, and we are going to celebrate you and who you are and everything that you do. So it definitely gives us perspective, because yes, you get very frustrated, especially since I work from home and he is home, and you hear it all day, like, and so
it's easy. It's definitely easy to forget, the trauma that we had to experience early in the pregnancy. When we look at Hayden today, and like, we put him in his walker, and he's freaking flying around the house. He's running into your ankles, and you're just like, God, hey, go over there or something, But at the same time, it's like, he can move his legs, and he can get to where he wants to go, and so that brings me that reassurance every day.
And even his brother will be like, Hayden, stop, and I'm like, you remember when you were praying for this? You remember when you were praying to play with your brother? And he's like, yeah. And then even in the car, he'll be like, Hayden's asleep. He'll look at Hayden. He'll be like, God really outdid himself, or like different stuff like that. Like, can you believe what the doctor said about my brother? Look at him. He's perfect.
She'll send me like videos or pictures of Hayden when I'm at work, and it's like him saying something, or just like climbing on his little toys. There's what's that toy called? I forget.
The gym?
Yeah, the little gym. It's got that little bar that goes across the top.
Do they lay down and play?
He was freaking. He was just hanging from it, like he was trying to pull himself up.
You're too big for that. He was trying to do pull-ups. I was like, stop.
And it was like, they tried to say he'd have CP. Look at him go.
Yeah. Which I can attest to. I watched him on Sunday in the nursery. It was just me and him hanging out in there. And he's just the happiest little baby that I've ever met in my entire life. He's just like crawling around on the floor. At one point, he wanted to crawl back into his car seat. And so I was like, I just put him in there, and he's just like, I'm just going to hang out in here for a little bit. And I was just like, you're just so cool, man.
Yeah. He's chill.
What would you say, and this is the end of my notes, what would you say to parents who maybe, you touched on this earlier with your family, Witney, about like, now's just not the time for the advice. And probably you had similar people in your life who tried to encourage you, and part of you's like, hey bro, not right now. So I'm going to ask you the same thing of, what would you say if a mom is going through that, and they're up late, they're watching this, it's 2:00 in the morning, they've Googled, my baby's dealing with this, and this, and I don't know what to do, and they come across our podcast, and they get to watch one clip of you addressing them, what would you say? Because what your mom was saying was annoying you, what he was saying was like, creating resentment. Like, what would you say to you in that moment?
And I think it's okay to not be okay, and to feel your emotions and allow for you the space to do so, and crash out if you need to, like, feel it, internalize it, and then just keep you've survived all of your hard days, every single one, and you're here in this moment, and you're gonna make it through.
I've heard, we spoke with another mom. We did an episode where we talked about raising special needs children, and she said that oftentimes people's encouragement came off offensive because it was implying that their child was less than. And what you're saying is like, I just wanted him alive.
Yeah.
Like, you're saying that like, he's going to be healed, which implies if he's not, then there's an issue.
Yeah, exactly.
And for you guys, there wasn't an issue. So it sounds like maybe that is like what I've heard a lot of moms who've gone through risky pregnancies or have special needs children is like, if your encouragement is things will get better, that's implying that things aren't good right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true.
And that's where, my stop was coming from.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think I would say, to those of you listening, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, for the Christians, there's power in prayer, and for the non-Christians, you could look at it as similar to manifestation. speaking positive things into your life, speaking for the life that you want, just keeping that good energy all the time. And, for Christians, we pray to God, like give us the strength, give us the wisdom, give us the patience, that sort of thing. And, just keep in mind that positive energy can multiply into more positive energy. And the same thing for negative energy. Negative energy will and can multiply into more negative energy. And that mindset can completely shift your life, I think. The way that you look at the world, the way you look at your life. If you only have a negative mindset, your life probably isn't going to get much better than it is right now. But vice versa. If you look at your life in a positive mindset, you keep feeding that positive energy, it's going to multiply and things will get better. No matter what happens, I think that can be true.
Yeah.
I will say one more thing to the dads out there, or the soon to be dads. Witney gives me this praise, from time to time. For the dads, you don't have to be perfect every single day during pregnancy, or even, after birth, when you're actually helping raise the child. It's more so like, are you present? Are you willing to be supportive? Are you willing to, do what's asked of you and what's needed of you? Like I said, you don't have to be perfect, but you need to be there. And so I think that's a very crucial, component of a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's super important too. I'm glad you said that, because I know a lot of dads struggle with, like, if I can't, there's this pressure of perfection.
Right.
And if I can't live up to it, then it's almost easier to say, why even bother?
Yeah.
Or why even try? Like, why put in the effort? And I noticed with Joe, like, there are so many times where she asks to be around me. Like today we painted her fingernails and she just wanted to show me her fingernails, and then she dipped again and she went off to play with her toys. But knowing that her dad was available was more like, she didn't need me to say anything to her.
Right.
She literally just said, "Dad, look at my nails."
Yeah.
And then same thing she did with y'all when y'all showed up.
Yeah.
Here are my fingernails, and then I'm out.
And that very well could be, a core memory for her.
Yeah.
Which is very important.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I think a lot of parents struggle with that. And it's like, we get this parent guilt at the end of the day of like, as soon as I lay Joe down for the night, I immediately think about all the things that I could have done better. And I think there's some health to that, because it does create like intentionality going into the future, like
sure.
self-reflection is good, but I also think parents would benefit a lot from giving themselves more grace.
Well, there's a lot of power in just like admitting when you're wrong.
Yeah.
And also, like, obviously she can't understand, but apologizing to her at some point of like, I'm not perfect either. I'm trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
But doing that, giving yourself that grace throughout the day, it's hard because you just want to dwell on it. But
Yeah.
kind of going to what you said, I feel like that's like the whole premise of the podcast.
That's where I was going to go next.
Of like, we started this whole thing of like, what you both said is exactly kind of sums up everything that we always try to talk about, is there's a time and a place to grieve and to go through your emotions and to feel all the feelings and do all the research and lean on God and then be mad at God and do all the stuff that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
But eventually you can't stay in that place any longer.
Yeah.
And you have to set your mind on more positive things and try to get yourself out of that rut, or, just pray that God will literally lift you out of it. But I think both of what you guys said is completely true and will help somebody one day. It's like, it's both. You have to sit in it, and you also have to be positive at some point in the process.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That was the last thing I was going to add. I don't know if you guys have listened to it or not, but that's our first episode we ever did, is why we named it the Broom Tree Podcast. And it comes from First Kings. I believe it's chapter 17, but it's when the prophet Elijah is the prophet for the nation of Israel. And he, what we would say today, stands on business and kills a whole bunch of false prophets. And the queen at the time puts out a hit on him. And in his confidence in the Lord, I would love to say that he stood up and faced the queen and fought back and did all this stuff. But if you're familiar with the story, he ran away. And he ran for 40 days. and then found a broom tree and literally said that he crawled up under the broom tree to die. Like the prophet who had just done all these great things was willing to, like he was ready to be done.
Yeah.
And when God confronts him, he doesn't confront him with anger or an attitude or you should have known better. It literally says that an angel woke him up, gave him food and water, and then told him to go back to sleep and let him rest some more. And then when he got up a second time, they did it again, and he gave him food and water and told him to rest. And then on the third time, God didn't tell him, you should be ashamed of yourself, go back and face your problems. He actually sent him somewhere else to remind him of how powerful he was. And when we read that story, I mean, like we'd always had this podcast in our heart, and it was for moments like that, for like Christians are so bad about, we find someone hiding under their tree, figuratively speaking, and we are bashing and we're judging and you should have known better and you should have more faith and you don't need to doubt, you need to believe and blah, blah, blah. And in the scriptures, we literally see God doing the exact opposite. And he's like, I will just sit here with you for a little while.
Yeah.
And I think it would be fair from the testimony y'all have given. God did the same thing with y'all. When you got the diagnosis and you felt the feelings you felt towards God, those are the same feelings Elijah felt towards God, that I felt towards God, that you felt towards God. And he did get mad at me, but he just met me where I was.
Yeah, he wasn't surprised that you were angry or confused or...
And so many Christians, I think, would benefit from that.
Yeah.
Like you talked about being present and not perfect as Christians.
Yeah.
Like we do that. It's like, I've had a bad day, a bad week. The last thing I want to do is go to God now.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, the same principle applies.
Yeah. I think there's two sides, like there, especially with Christians and everything. You either have the Christian who is like, you just have to stay positive the entire time. And why are you doubting or why are you considering all of these options? Or you have the other side of it that they're just like, you stay in that place. Like you feel all the feelings, but they almost encourage that you stay there the whole time and never get out of that. And you would have missed a lot if you had stayed in that place, and it's just a healthy, I think
a piece of advice I got from a dad during my pregnancy who had dealt with a difficult pregnancy, health scare. He said, like, feel your feelings, live in the moment, take the pictures. Because when you are struggling that much, you don't take the pictures, you don't live in the moment. You live in the depression or like whatever feeling you're feeling, but like, and you're not going to take the pictures in those moments, and then you look back and you have nothing for the pregnancy, whether it goes good or whether it goes bad, you're going to wish you had something, to remember it by. Right. And that was like, oh, cause I'm a picture person anyway, and I was not during that time. I was like, no, absolutely not. Like I had nothing scheduled.
Want it over. Yeah.
And when he said that, I was like, you're right, because I'm going to I don't want any more kids, this is my last pregnancy, and I'm going to be even more upset no matter what happens with my baby that I didn't have this moment because I was so down, live in it, but then like also try to do those things. And
well, that was going to be my next question too, is if you guys are going to have kids now.
Yeah.
We were good.
Well, especially because we thought he was going to be special needs and like everything that entailed. I was done. I almost got my tubes tied, but I didn't for like hormonal reasons and research and stuff, but I was absolutely 2 and done. 3 wouldn't be the worst thing ever.
There you go. There it is. That's what I was waiting for.
But
when we first met, I did tell her, I was good with just the 1 because she already had 1. And so 2 together, like to me, that was plenty. That was good.
Yeah.
But
we'll see.
I know. It always, like I always said it too. I didn't want kids at all when we first got married.
I want 4 or 5.
And then we had, he wants a ton. I don't think that's going to happen.
Big families are fun families.
Amen to that.
But then we had Joe, and then when she was born, I was like, I can't do this again. This was really hard. And then she hit a year, and I was like, I don't know, maybe,
Especially because, this was the time, like, Leo started getting super independent, school, sports. He's not my baby anymore. Yeah. And now I have a baby, like a mama's boy again, I was like, what if that happens again? Right. When Leo's a teenager, Hayden's 5, not wanting me, like, hey.
There's some days she's looking at Hayden, she's like, we're having another baby. And then there's other days where she's like, do not come near me. We're not having another baby.
Yeah.
No, and Amanda always says, don't ask me while I'm pregnant, because the answer is always no.
Yeah.
But give it time. Get through that rough newborn phase,
Yeah.
and then they're kind of in that playful 6 month to a year phase. And
Oh my gosh, that's the best phase.
All right, I'm considering it. So,
100%.
well, thank you guys. Thank you guys for your honesty, for your transparency. I know we recorded for a while. We always do.
I know. Yeah.
But I think it's good conversation. I think it's conversation that people need to hear.
Right.
And I hope that there's a family out there that was researching like y'all were, comes across this and feels encouraged, feels hopeful, doesn't feel annoyed, but feels supported, feels heard, feels validated. And I think they will. I don't have reason to believe that they won't.
Yeah.
And now one last thing. You're a welder, and you said you work for the credit union, but you also have a pretty decent social media presence. We came across your TikTok, and you've got a decent little following out there. You've got a little entourage. And so when we post this, if you're cool with it, what we'll do is we're going to tag all of y'all's socials in that so that you can... people, if they want to reach out for more questions or anything like that, if you're cool with that.
Yeah, of course.
Because we've never been through that. And so as we get DMs sometimes from past guests and they're like, hey, I want to know about this. I'm like, let me give you their, handle.
Yeah.
And so we'll put your stuff in that so that you guys can continue to grow that as well. But thank you all again. And to the Broom Tree, we will see you guys next episode. Don't forget to it's all the cringy stuff I don't like to say. Like, subscribe, comment, share, all this stuff for real though, so that other people can be impacted by this. But thank you all for listening, and we will see y'all next episode. Peace.